Close your eyes and open your mind. Tonight, we travel not only into story, but into storm, into a time when the world itself seemed to dim, and human imagination caught fire in the dark. It was the summer of 1816, though you would hardly have known it. Across Europe, skies were cloaked with ash, cast up by the distant eruption of Mount Tambora in the east. The sun hung low and strange, a dull red disk veiled by dust. Crops withered, harvests failed, the air was chill, and rain fell in endless sheets. Superstition grew thick in the villages. Some whispered that the end of the world was near, that this dimming was a judgment, a punishment. But in Switzerland, along the quiet shores of Lake Geneva, the storm gave birth not to endings, but to legends. At the Villa Diodati, a grand house overlooking the grey waters, a circle of writers and dreamers gathered to escape the relentless rain. The wind rattled the shutters, the lightning struck across the lake, and within those shadowed halls the flicker of candlelight became a theatre of imagination. There was George Gordon, Lord Byron, restless and defiant, a poet whose fame was as much scandal as brilliance. Beside him, Percy Bysshe Shelley, idealist and visionary, with Mary at his side, Mary Wollstonecraft Godwin, only 18, but already steeped in the heritage of radical thought. Her mother, Mary Wollstonecraft, had been a trailblazer for women's rights. Her father, William Godwin, a philosopher who believed in the power of reason and justice. From them, she had inherited a fierce intellect, but also a heart that carried deep sorrow, for her mother had died giving her life. That night, as the rain lashed against the windows, Byron proposed a game. "Let us each create a ghost story," he challenged. Something to chill the blood, something to match the thunder outside. One by one they tried. Byron sketched fragments of dark imaginings. Percy wove fragments of poetry. Polidori, the young physician, began a tale of a noble vampire that would later inspire Bram Stoker himself. But Mary? She sat silent. Days passed, and she could think of no story. Until one sleepless night she dreamt awake. She wrote later, "I saw the pale student of unhallowed arts kneeling beside the thing he had put together. I saw the hideous phantasm of a man stretched out, and then, on the working of some powerful engine, show signs of life, and stir with an uneasy, half-vital motion." It was not merely a vision of horror. It was an echo of every myth humanity had carried for centuries, reshaped through the lightning-lit lens of science. For mankind had long whispered of creation. In the mystic texts of the alchemists, there was the promise of the homunculus, a tiny human crafted in a flask, conjured through secret formulas. In Jewish folklore, the golem was formed from clay, life breathed into it with sacred words. The Greeks told of Prometheus, who defied the gods to shape mankind from earth, and stole fire to give them life. Each tale carried both wonder and warning. And now, in Mary's time, science itself seemed to approach those forbidden thresholds. The experiments of Luigi Galvani had already shocked the world. With copper and iron, he had sent sparks into the legs of dead frogs, making them twitch, leap, as if life had returned. Crowds gasped at the sight, uncertain if it was miracle or madness. His nephew, Giovanni Aldini, went further still. In gruesome demonstrations, he applied currents to the bodies of the executed. Before wide-eyed audiences, corpses would shudder, jaws would clench, fists would raise, as though trying to live again. Some swore they saw eyes open, lips move, a mockery of resurrection. These stories reached Mary. They colored her dream, a student of unhallowed arts, piecing together what should not be joined. A body stitched from death itself, jolted to trembling life. Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, by candlelight, the seed of Frankenstein had been planted. Not merely a ghost story, but a story that would capture the deepest fear of humankind, that we might reach too far. That in seeking to create we might instead destroy. And so, in that haunted summer, among poets and storm clouds, a legend was born. Let the candlelight guide you deeper. For though Mary Shelley's pen gave us Victor Frankenstein, the idea of the mad creator is far older, rooted in myth, legend, and whispers carried through centuries. Humanity has always feared and longed for the power to create life, and so, in every culture, tales emerged of men who dared to play God. In ancient Greece, there was Prometheus, the titan who shaped mankind from clay, then stole fire from Olympus to animate his fragile creations. For this act of defiance, he was punished, chained to a rock where an eagle devoured his liver each day, only for it to grow back by night. Prometheus was both savior and sinner, bringer of life, but also a warning of the cost of overreaching. The ancients also whispered of Pygmalion, the sculptor who carved a statue of such beauty that he fell in love with it. The gods, pitying his devotion, breathed life into the marble, and the stone became flesh. A miracle of love, yes, but also a subtle echo of humanity's urge to shape life with their own hands. Far from Greece, in the traditions of Jewish folklore, there was the golem. Formed of clay and animated by sacred letters, it was a being of strength and silence, created to defend and to serve. Yet the golem was also dangerous, for once given life, it could not always be controlled. The very thing that was meant to protect could become the destroyer. And in the shadowed manuscripts of the alchemists, another vision emerged, the homunculus. Tiny figures, they claimed, could be forged in glass vessels with secret formulas, nurtured into life by mystical arts. Few ever believed these tales, but they lingered in the imagination, humanity's yearning to bend nature to its will, and the dread of what might happen if such an act succeeded. By the Middle Ages, whispers spread of sorcerers who tried to craft living servants, conjuring spirits into wax figures or mannequins of wood and straw. In Arabic alchemy, there were even stories of automata, artificial beings made of brass and gears, moving as though alive, blurring the line between invention and enchantment. Each of these tales carried the same seed, the ambition to create life where none should be. And always, that ambition was shadowed by consequence. The gods punished. The creations rebelled. The makers themselves were doomed by the very hands of their work. By the dawn of the 19th century, these stories had converged with science. No longer were they just myths, whispered in temples, or legends murmured in candlelight. Now they mingled with laboratories, dissection tables, and sparks of electricity. Mary Shelley had read of Galvani and Aldini. She had heard tales of men who dreamed of animating flesh, of reawakening the dead. She knew, too, the old stories of Prometheus and the golem. Out of these threads she wove a figure who was both modern scientist and ancient myth reborn. Victor Frankenstein, the man who would not be content to study nature, but who sought instead to rival it. A student who chased knowledge beyond its boundaries, into graveyards, into storms, into places where life and death blur together. The legend of the mad creator had lived for millennia, but now, in Mary's pages, it had a name. Let us step now into Switzerland, to a land of clear lakes and snow-capped mountains, where the city of Geneva rests quietly along the water's edge. Here, in this place of beauty and order, was born Victor Frankenstein, the man whose name would forever be bound to creation and to ruin. Victor's childhood was one of privilege, but also of shadows. His family was respected, his home filled with warmth and care, yet within him stirred a restless hunger that no comfort could soothe. He was drawn, even as a boy, to the mysteries of nature. While others played in the gardens, Victor pored over books that spoke of hidden forces, of elements, of powers beyond ordinary reach. He read of Cornelius Agrippa, the mystic philosopher who sought the secrets of the universe. He devoured the words of Paracelsus, the alchemist who believed the world could be transmuted through hidden arts. And he studied Albertus Magnus, the medieval scholar whose experiments blurred the line between science and sorcery. To most, these books were relics, curiosities of a bygone age. To Victor, they were a spark, pages that hinted that the veil of the natural world might yet be lifted, if one dared to look deep enough. But Victor's fascination was not with gentle wonders. He did not dream only of healing or wisdom. What stirred him most was the forbidden thought: could life itself be summoned? Could death be undone? As he grew, so too did his obsession. He began to haunt the lecture halls of natural philosophy, listening with burning eyes as his professors spoke of chemistry, of anatomy, of the forces of electricity. What once belonged to alchemy and legend now belonged to science. And Victor, caught between the two, believed that he could marry both. Geneva, with its calm waters and noble traditions, seemed too small, too quiet for such feverish dreams. And so Victor left his family home behind, journeying to Ingolstadt, to the university where the greatest minds of his age gathered. There, away from the soft comfort of his parents, Victor plunged into study with a ferocity that startled even his tutors. He dissected, he analyzed, he experimented. His nights grew long, his health grew frail, but still he pressed on. For in his mind, a vision had begun to take shape, a vision of life forged not by nature, but by human hand. The graveyards became his laboratories. The dissecting rooms, his temples of discovery. He scoured charnel houses and mortuaries, collecting fragments, bones, sinews, as though piecing together a puzzle too terrible to name. And yet, as he worked, he felt no fear, only triumph. For was he not walking in the footsteps of Prometheus, stealing fire from the gods? Was he not about to prove that the secrets of existence itself could be mastered, if only one dared enough? Victor Frankenstein was still young, but the die was cast. The path he had chosen would lead him, and all who loved him, into darkness. The nights at Ingolstadt grew long, and Victor's lamp burned when all others were dark. He had withdrawn from the chatter of his fellow students, from the comforts of home and hearth, and surrendered himself to the fever of his work. The human frame became his obsession. He charted the muscles of the body, the patterns of veins, the delicate workings of nerves. He studied the pulse, the breath, the fragile balance of the heart. But for Victor, this was not enough. To understand life was only the first step. He craved more. He craved to command it. So he went to where life and death meet. To the dissecting rooms, thick with the bitter tang of formaldehyde. To graveyards where the earth was damp and heavy, and silence lay on the stones. He scavenged what others discarded, fragments of bodies, remnants of once living men. He gathered them as a craftsman gathers wood and stone, piecing together what would become his masterpiece, or his curse. Each night he worked in secret. His chamber became a vault of shadows, filled with jars, with bones, with instruments gleaming under candlelight. The smell of decay hung in the air, but Victor no longer noticed. His spirit was consumed by one thought: to bestow animation upon lifeless matter. He chose his materials with care. He wished his creation to be strong, enduring. And so the figure grew, immense and towering, stitched from the remains of the dead. The frame of a giant, built not for beauty, but for power. But how to breathe life into what was cold? Here, Victor turned to the forces of nature itself. He had studied electricity, the mysterious current that could jolt muscle and stir movement in the dead. He imagined that if enough of this force could be harnessed, it might kindle the spark of life itself. The nights blurred together. His body grew gaunt, his eyes hollow, his hair unkempt. Yet still he labored, for he felt as if fate itself pressed him on. He was on the brink of discovery that would change the world forever. And then, at last, the night arrived. Outside, a storm gathered. The wind shook the windows, the sky split with lightning. Victor prepared his instruments, his hands trembling, his breath shallow. Upon the table lay the form he had fashioned, vast, motionless, a patchwork of death. Candles flickered, casting long shadows across its face. Victor adjusted the coils, the wires, the engines of his design. The storm roared above. His heart pounded like a drum, and then the spark. A crack of thunder shook the night. Electricity surged, hissing through the wires, dancing across the still flesh. For a breathless instant there was silence, and then a twitch, a shiver in the fingers, the dull gleam of an eye opening, the slow heave of a chest drawing breath. It lived. Victor staggered back, his triumph curdling into horror. The thing before him was not the glorious creation he had imagined. Its skin was stretched thin and yellow over the sinews beneath. Its hair was black and matted, its lips a sickly hue, its face distorted and grotesque. It raised itself, unsteady, confused, and Victor saw not a miracle, but a monster. He fled from the chamber, heart racing, abandoning the being he had brought into the world. Behind him, the creature stirred, alone in the darkness. Its maker had turned away, unable to bear the sight of his own success. And so, with a single spark, the fate of Victor Frankenstein was sealed. Victor's breath came ragged as he pressed himself against the wall of his chamber. His heart pounded, his temples ached, and yet his eyes could not tear away from the figure on the table. It moved again, slowly, clumsily, as though uncertain of its own form. The hands, enormous, clumsy things, flexed, the fingers curling and uncurling with a creak of stiff sinews. The chest rose once more, shuddering as it drew another rasp of air. And then came a sound, low, uncertain, half a sigh, half a groan. Victor felt the triumph drain from him. Where he had dreamed of beauty, he saw only distortion. The lips parted, revealing uneven teeth behind pale gums. The eyes, though open, were dull and watery, like windows that reflected only sorrow. He had dreamed of a being glorious, a new Adam, perfect and strong. Instead, he had forged a thing that looked back at him with blank, pitiful terror. The storm outside raged on. Thunder rolled across the sky. Lightning flared against the shutters, but inside the chamber it was the silence, the unbearable silence of the living dead, that filled Victor's ears. The creature sat up. It did not rise swiftly, but with a heavy, stumbling effort, as though the weight of its new body bore it down. Its movements were jerky, uncoordinated, like those of a child first learning to stand. It lifted its head, as if seeking the one who had made it, and Victor recoiled. A wave of nausea swept through him. His own hands trembled, not with pride, but with dread. What had he done? He had stolen fire from the heavens, seized the mystery of life itself, and this abomination, was the fruit of his triumph. He could not bear it. He turned and fled. Through the narrow halls of his lodging he stumbled, his lamp swinging, shadows leaping across the walls. He heard behind him the slow scrape of movement, the uncertain steps of the thing that now lived, abandoned and confused. But Victor could not turn back. He rushed into the night, where the storm beat down upon him, the rain cold against his face. Hours passed in restless wandering until at last exhaustion overcame him. He collapsed into uneasy sleep, haunted by dreams of his mother's corpse turning to dust in his arms, of Elizabeth transformed into a decaying body before his eyes. When morning broke, pale light spilled through the windows. Victor stirred, unsteady, hoping perhaps it had all been some dreadful nightmare. But when he returned to his chamber, he found the bed empty. The creature was gone, vanished into the world, like a shadow loosed from its master. Victor felt relief, but also dread. For though the being had disappeared, he knew it walked the earth now, alone, unloved, born of his ambition, and abandoned at the moment of its birth. He pressed a hand to his chest, trying to still the tremor within. Yet the truth was inescapable, the deed was done. Victor Frankenstein had created life, and in doing so, he had created his ruin. The dawn, after his creation, broke grey and cold, and with it began the wanderings of the creature. He stepped into a world he did not know, his body heavy, his limbs uncertain, his mind a fog of half-formed thoughts. The forest swallowed him, damp and shadowed. He felt the bite of the wind on his skin, the ache of hunger in his belly, the strangeness of his own breath misting before him. He was new, yet burdened by the weight of a body stitched from death. His senses were sharp, but overwhelming. Every sound, the rustle of leaves, the cry of a raven, struck him as both wondrous and terrifying. In his first days, he lived as an animal. He drank from cold streams, he fed on berries and roots, his great hands clumsy as he tore what he could find. Hunger gnawed at him, but worse still was loneliness. For he knew, though dimly, that he was different. The birds sang, the deer fled through the trees, but none looked upon him with kindness. One night, shivering beneath the boughs, he stumbled upon a fire left by passing wanderers. The coals still glowed red in the ash. He reached out, curious, and flinched at the sudden pain that scorched his hand. Yet when he drew back, the warmth called to him. Slowly, he learned to feed the embers with wood, to coax flame to life. Fire became his companion, cruel and kind, burning and comforting. But the world of men was less forgiving. When he dared approach a village, seeking warmth, the sight of him caused screams to rise. Mothers pulled their children indoors. Men rushed out with stones and sticks. The creature, bewildered and wounded, fled into the night, the blows of his pursuers ringing in his memory. It was then he understood. To human eyes he was a monster. No matter his longing for tenderness, no matter his innocence, his face was enough to condemn him. So he hid himself deeper in the woods, moving by night, watching from shadows. His hunger drove him to steal scraps of food, though guilt pressed upon him. He was a child in a giant's body, unknowing, unloved. And then, in his solitude, he found a small cottage. It stood at the edge of a clearing, humble and quiet, with a family who lived within, the De Lassys. By day he stayed hidden in a shed beside their home, peering through cracks in the wall. He watched the old blind father, kind in his gestures, his voice soft with wisdom. He saw the son laboring in the fields, and the daughter singing as she worked. They spoke together, their words gentle, their love evident. The creature listened, he watched, and in silence he began to learn. He gathered scraps of their speech, imitating the sounds in whispers. He studied the rhythms of their daily lives, the warmth of their companionship. They had what he longed for most, belonging. Night after night he remained, unnoticed, his heart swelling with hope. Perhaps, he thought, if he could speak as they did, if he could show them kindness, they might look past his face and welcome him as one of their own. So the creature, born of death, abandoned at birth, rejected by all, found in secret a fragile dream. A dream of family, of acceptance, of love. But the world is rarely kind to such dreams. The seasons turned, and with them the creature grew in knowledge. He learned the words of men, the history of their struggles, the rhythm of their lives. He read books found in the forest, Paradise Lost, Plutarch's Lives, The Sorrows of Werther. In their pages he discovered passion, justice, sorrow, and love. But with every word he learned, every truth he uncovered, the ache in his heart deepened. For he understood at last what he was. He was not Adam, beloved and blessed. He was closer to Satan, cast out and despised, created but unloved, alive yet forever alone. When at last he dared to approach the de Lacys, he chose the blind father, hoping that one who could not see his face might hear only the sincerity in his voice. He spoke gently, humbly, begging for kindness. But when the others returned and saw the monstrous figure kneeling at their father's side, their terror overwhelmed them. They drove him away with blows and curses, his fragile dream shattered. Rage and despair burned within him. Rejected by those he loved in secret, hunted by strangers, cursed by his very existence, the creature turned his thoughts back to the one who had brought him into this world. Victor, his maker. He sought him out, and when at last they met, it was in the lonely vastness of the mountains. There, among peaks crowned with ice, the creature confronted his creator. Victor recoiled at the sight, yet the creature did not strike. His voice, deep and trembling, broke the silence. "You are my father, yet you spurn me. You gave me life, but no place in it. I was good, my heart was open, but I was despised, rejected. Everywhere I go, men flee me. They curse me. They beat me. I am miserable, and I will make you so, unless, Victor, you grant me one mercy." Victor's eyes burned with loathing, but the creature pressed on. "I am alone, hideous, abandoned. Give me one who is like me. Give me a mate, so that I may share my life with another who does not shrink from my face. Swear to Creator, and I will leave mankind forever. We will vanish into the wild places of the world, and you will never see me again." The demand weighed heavily on Victor's heart. Could he grant such a request? His mind reeled with images of a second being, a companion for his creature. Perhaps she would bring him peace. Perhaps she would calm his rage. And yet, perhaps she would not. What if this new being rejected him, as all others had? What if together they multiplied? A new race, stronger than man, loosed upon the earth. Victor shuddered at the thought of his ambition multiplying into a curse for all humanity. Yet the creature's words were not without power. His misery was raw, his loneliness undeniable. Victor, trembling between pity and horror, agreed. He would fashion a mate. He would grant this one final mercy. And so, once more, Victor turned to the graveyards and laboratories, gathering the materials of his terrible craft. His hands, though reluctant, repeated the rituals of his youth. His nights grew long again, his health frail, his spirit broken. But as the new form took shape upon his table, Victor's resolve faltered. He thought of the promise he had made. He thought of the shadow that hung over him. And then, one night, he looked upon the half-finished form of the creature's mate. And in a surge of terror, he destroyed it. Before his horrified eyes, the fragments of what might have been were torn apart, cast into pieces. Victor swore aloud, "Never, never shall I unleash another like you upon this earth." And from the shadows the creature emerged, watching, his face twisted with fury, his eyes burning with grief. "You have destroyed my happiness," he growled, his voice like thunder. "So I will destroy yours." And with that vow, the fate of all Victor held dear was sealed. The vow hung in the air like thunder. "I will be with you on your wedding night." Those words, spoken by the creature, echoed in Victor's mind, night after sleepless night. He could not shake them, could not outpace them. They clung to him like a shadow, pressing against every step he took. Soon the vengeance began. It came first in innocence, in Victor's younger brother, William, a child full of life, laughter and promise. One moment, the boy played among the fields near Geneva, and the next he was gone, found lifeless, his small body strangled, his face still soft with the peace of youth. Victor knew. He knew in his heart who had done this, but others did not. And so suspicion fell upon Justine Moritz, a servant girl beloved by the family. Circumstantial evidence condemned her, and she was brought to trial. Though she wept her innocence, she was sentenced to death. Victor's heart broke. He watched as the rope took Justine's life, knowing she was guiltless, knowing that the true murderer was his own creation, yet he said nothing, for fear, for shame, for the dread of being believed. His silence made him complicit. The creature's vow was unfolding, and it would not stop there. Years passed in a haze of torment. Victor tried to find solace in his work, in travel, in the quiet company of his family. He clung to the love of Elizabeth, his promised bride, hoping that marriage might bring some measure of peace. But in the dark corners of his mind, he heard again that dreadful whisper, "I will be with you on your wedding night." Still, he clung to hope. On the evening of their union, he walked beside Elizabeth, her hand gentle in his. The halls of their home were lit with soft lamps, and for a moment Victor dared to believe the curse had lifted, that the storm had passed. But as night deepened and the house grew silent, tragedy struck. Victor heard a cry, Elizabeth's voice, sharp with terror. He rushed into the chamber where she lay, only to find her lifeless on the bed, her face pale, her lips still parted in a final scream. The creature had kept his promise. On the night of joy he had brought despair. Victor's world collapsed. His father, broken by grief, soon followed her into the grave. All that Victor had loved was gone. His family line, his future, his heart, all had been torn from him, one, by the hands of the being he had made. Grief hardened into fury. Where once he had recoiled from his creation, now Victor pursued him with relentless hatred. Across mountains and forests, across rivers and fields, he followed the faint traces. A footprint in the snow, a mark on the bark of a tree, a whisper carried by frightened villagers. The chase grew longer, darker, colder. Victor abandoned comfort, abandoned sleep, abandoned even his own health. He became as restless as the creature, driven only by vengeance. His hair grew wild, his body frail, but still he pressed on. At last, the path led north, beyond the forests of Europe, beyond the icy seas, into the frozen wilderness of the Arctic. There, among jagged icebergs and endless night, the hunter and the hunted circled one another. Victor's breath grew thin in the freezing air, but he did not falter. He had lost everything, and so there was nothing left but the pursuit. In the distance, across the frozen wastes, he glimpsed a towering figure, striding with inhuman strength. And still he pressed on, deeper into the ice, into the silence, into the end. The ice stretched endlessly, white upon white, beneath a sky of steel. The winds howled like wolves across the frozen sea, and the creak of shifting glaciers broke the silence. It was into this desolation that Victor pursued his creation, body frail, spirit burning, heart hollowed by loss. His strength waned, his feet stumbled. Yet he pressed on, his fury like a dying flame that refused to go out. Each glimpse of the distant figure, dark against the snow, striding with unnatural endurance, drove him forward. The chase became his only reason to live. And then his strength gave way. Exhausted, feverish, Victor collapsed upon the ice. His lips murmured fragments of his story, his body trembling against the cold. It was there he was found, not by his creature, but by another wanderer, Captain Robert Walton, commander of a ship trapped in the Arctic Sea. Walton had sailed north in search of discovery, hungering for glory in uncharted lands. But what he found was Victor Frankenstein, wasted and broken, a man who had pursued knowledge past all reason. As the ship lay fast in the ice, Victor told his tale. He spoke of his childhood in Geneva, of the promise of science, of the fever that had driven him to create life. He spoke of the creature's birth, of his abandonment, of the murders that followed, each one a wound carved into his heart. He told of the demand for a mate, of the vow of vengeance, of the long pursuit that had brought him here, to the end of the world. Walton listened, his pen recording each word, each warning. For Victor's story was more than a confession. It was a testament to the danger of unchecked ambition, the peril of a man who sought to rival nature and paid with everything he loved. Victor's breath grew shallow. His eyes, once fierce, dimmed with exhaustion. Before the final silence took him, he spoke, "Learn from me. Even if not by my precepts, at least by my example. How dangerous is the pursuit of knowledge, when it exceeds the limits of human understanding." And with that, Victor Frankenstein passed from this world, leaving only his story behind. But the tale was not yet ended. Walton, grieving, stood watch over the body. And then, one night, he heard a sound. Heavy footsteps upon the deck, a presence looming in the shadows. From the darkness emerged the creature. He was taller, gaunter than any man, his face carved with sorrow. He stood over Victor's corpse, and for the first time in his long tormented existence, tears fell from his eyes. "Oh, Frankenstein," he whispered, his voice low, breaking. "My creator, my tormentor, and my only kin. You cursed me with life, and then abandoned me. I destroyed your joy because I had none of my own. And now, you are gone. What remains for me but misery?" Walton listened in silence as the creature confessed his grief. He spoke of his longing for love, his rejection, his descent into vengeance. He admitted his crimes, his rage, his hatred. Yet in that final moment, all that remained was sorrow. "He is gone," the creature said. "And with him, the last tie that bound me to this earth. I am alone. Forever." He turned from the corpse, his shoulders bowed, his frame trembling with grief. He looked to Walton one final time and spoke, "I shall go now, into the northern waste. There, upon the funeral pile I shall build for myself, this body shall burn. I shall vanish into the darkness, and you shall never see me again." And with that, he was gone. Out into the night, across the frozen ice, his figure fading into the white storm until it could no longer be seen. Walton wrote his last letter. He told his sister of the strange tale he had heard, of the man who created life and destroyed himself, of the being who had lived unloved and who vanished into sorrow. Then, with his ship freed from the grip of the ice, he turned south, back to the warmth of home. And so the tale ended, as it had begun, with storm and silence. A story of fire stolen, of life created, of ruin reaped. The name of Frankenstein would live on, not only as the man, but as the monster, forever stitched together in memory. Close your eyes, open your mind, and let the cold winds of the Arctic fade into dreams.